So Canada is in a bit of mourning right now after the events that unfolded out in BC, Tumbler Ridge, small town, about 2,400 people, experience a school shooting that is the most tragic we have seen in Canadian history. Now, we see this commonly with our neighbors in the United States. We're obviously sympathetic. Obviously, shootings should not be occurring. And witnessing here that same scenario being taken place and thinking that it was never going to happen to us and we would never have to self-examine or do some searching ourselves. Well, now has became that time. Now has become that time to really grasp at why these still occur, why this is still occurring. And a lot of people will obviously jump the gun and say, well, this is about the guns, or this is about this, or this is about that. I think the important thing is not only, grieving with the families that have now lost their children in this horrific shooting and the victims that have died, but also to have the conversations necessary to get our heads around to why this is occurring and why this has become just so normalized at this point that we keep seeing this over and over again, that it's just going to get reported and then swept under the rug, and then no one's going to, go back to it and examine, why this happened. So here to break it down, this is from Reuters here. It says 10 dead after shooter opens fire at Canadian high school in a rare massacre. So this just happened February 10th, so just a couple days ago this occurred. And it says 10 people, including the shooter, are dead after an assailant opened fire at a high school in Western Canada on Tuesday in one of the country's deadliest mass casualties events in recent history. The attack brought to Canada the type of mass shooting more common in the neighboring United States and was carried out by a shooter described as female, police said. Now, I emphasize that point because what you're going to see later on is they intentionally lied about the description of the shooter. You're going to see why in a second. 6 people were found dead inside a high school in the town of Tumbler Ridge in British Columbia. 2 more people were found dead at the residence believed to be connected to the incident, and another person died on the way to the hospital, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said. At least 2 other people were hospitalized with serious or life-threatening wounds. As many as 25 people were being treated for non-life-threatening injuries, police have said. Police did not say how many victims have been minors. Parents gathered in a local community center as they waited to learn the fate of their children. It was a situation that you really never want to face again. The sight of what I saw was devastating. Many parents just waiting for the news on whether their child had survived the shooting or not, the local pastor George Rowe. Police would only identify victims when they had absolute unequivocal identification, he told CBC News on Wednesday. So, obviously, just horrific and tragic, and being a parent, waiting to know if your child that simply just went to school is alive or not. Like, that's obviously heartbreaking. I couldn't imagine being that parent's shoes. Here's what Global News said in their recent newscast about this. This is out in BC.
RCMP have confirmed a total of 10 people are dead. That includes the suspect who died of a self-inflicted wound. 6 victims were found dead in the high school. 2 victims dead at a separate location. That location being a home. We're still trying to confirm exactly where. Police say 1 victim died en route to hospital. As for the injured, 2 victims were airlifted to hospital with serious injuries. 25 others were triaged, according to police, at the local medical center for non-life-threatening injuries. The backstory here, Tumbler Ridge RCMP got reports of an active shooter around 1:20 p.m. local time at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. The school was put on lockdown. We talked to a grade 9 student who said it was terrifying. They had to hide in a classroom for more than an hour before being released to a nearby community center. In fact, the entire community of nearly 2,000 people told to stay inside, businesses shut down, for several hours. That emergency alert has since been canceled. As I speak, a significant number of RCMP resources are heading to Tumbler Ridge. That includes more frontline officers, BC RCMP major crime investigators, as well as victim services. Right now, the police are keeping a lot of the details close to them.
We're still trying to determine a lot about the shooter at this stage right now. We believe we've been able to identify the shooter, but for privacy reasons and obviously for the conduct of the investigation, we're not releasing that information at that time until we're assured that we've connected with the appropriate people.
So, this is a bit of a complicated scenario. This is a bit of a complicated thing because I understand that as a minor, as a teenager, as a child, you can't release that information because they're a minor. At the same time, though, when they're engaged in a violent crime that shuts down an entire small town, that goes to show you how small Tumbler Ridge is. When a school shooting is occurring, they're shutting down the entire city. The entire town was shut down. They were in full lockdown. And you can't even say who this person is or describe them. You know, I don't even have to really give a name, but just a description. This is the conflicting part. This is the conflicting part that I understand, you know, not giving the identities of the victims because they are young and under a jurisdiction. They can't reveal the information of a minor. They can't do that. But at the same time, you got the shooter, the suspected shooter, who opened fire, killed these many people, also killed themselves. You still won't release the information. That's what's conflicting about this. That's what people are raising eyebrows and really getting angered by this. And we're going to get onto that in a bit here. So I just want to show, though, here's Mark Carney in the House of Commons during question period. They gave some time to reflect and sympathize with what happened in Tumbler Ridge, BC. And here's what he said about this.
Speaker, this morning, families in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, woke to a different world. Parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, began this day as their first day on earth without someone they loved dearly. What happened has left our nation in shock and all of us in mourning. 9 people killed, more than 25 others injured, some still in hospital fighting for their lives. The investigation is ongoing, and we must allow law enforcement the time and space to do their work accordingly. Mr. Speaker, as this House knows, Tumbler Ridge is a community of some 2,400 people nestled in the foothills of the Rockies. It is one of the youngest towns in the great province of British Columbia. It's carved out of the wilderness in the 1980s, built on the promise of the resource economy and by the determination of its residents. It's a town of miners, teachers, construction workers, families who have built their lives there, people who have always shown up for each other there. When wildfires raged, neighbors helped each other pack up and move out of harm's way. They checked in on seniors and those living alone. They made sure that no one was left behind. When the coal mines shut down, residents supported local businesses. They shared leads for jobs, and they lifted each other up. Mr. Speaker, Tumbler Ridge represents the very best of Canada, resilient, compassionate, and strong. Hier médecin.
So then he goes into, obviously, kind of the same iterations in French. That was kind of a generic sympathy. It's basically the thoughts and prayers that you hear politicians in the United States. It's oh, we feel bad about the situation, but it doesn't mean we're actually going to change anything for the better. We're not actually going to invest into mental health resources. Even though we've called out mental health for being one of the problems, and I agree 100%, they're not actually going to do anything. They're not going to do anything, just like they're not going to do with the drug epidemic that's happening in BC. They're not going to do anything with the homelessness crisis. They're not going to do anything for the economy. They're not going to do anything for young people. So, forgive me, even though this is kind of a rare instance that happens in this country, hearing stuff like this doesn't just sit well with me. I don't feel sympathy. I don't share the same sympathy that Mark Carney is kind of faking here. Like, I feel more heartbroken that families all across the country, whether you're in Tumbler Ridge or not, are being screwed equally, and has led to a scenario like this. Like, that's what I feel more sad about that than, having the same sympathy as Mark Carney talking about, resiliency. Tumbler Ridge's resiliency after the coal mine shut down. They all came together, and that's why I am reading this speech and pretending that I'm going to actually maybe do something. Not really. Not really. Here is Pierre Poilievre making a similar case here. Let's take a quick listen to that. We're not going to listen to all of it because it's fairly lengthy, but here.
And thank you, Prime Minister, for your eloquent words. I'm sure words that you never wanted to deliver on the floor of this chamber. As fathers, we both know the feeling of sending our kids to school, hoping that they'll play and perform, laugh and learn, but most of all, come home to us in our loving arms at night. Sure, there's the odd skinned knee or sore belly when they get back, but that's usually the worst of our concerns. Yesterday, as we were tucking our kids in, I got a terrible phone call from Bob Zimmer, the Member of Parliament, who represents Tumbler Ridge, telling me that a shooting had occurred, and though not details were not yet well known, it was going to be bad. And those details have come in. Children who should have been thinking about homework and hockey were instead thrown into terror, grief, and unbearable uncertainty. 9 lives were stolen, 25 injured, 9 families devastated, an entire community in grief. That community is the best of Canada, a community of miners and loggers, hard-working people, hardy, strong, the kind of people who fight their own battles but never hesitate to help a neighbor in need. They are the backbone of this nation. Behind every number is a name, a child, a friend, a teacher, a neighbor, a family member, each with a story. For as the rabbi said, each life is its own universe.
So, yeah, I want to feel like they have this genuine sympathy, and maybe they do. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit that they deserve. And, considering that Pierre Poilievre, despite his flaws, despite the things that we said about him, despite, the fact that he is, just the other side of the same coin, and that Parliament is completely captured, he has made some leadway into discussing vital issues that does affect Canadians, that should be brought to more attention, and is at least trying to bring that to the specter. So maybe I give credit to Pierre Poilievre just a bit, but it does seem very eerie that both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, just generalizing the fact that, oh, this is a small town and they're the majesty of this country and just how great they are. They're resilient. At the same time, it just feels like, even with this incident, do you think anything's going to really happen that's going to benefit the general outcome of the country? we'll have to wait and see. But I'm not going to put my eggs into that basket. I'm not going to get my hopes up on that. Because even with an incident like this, that puts the nation in mourning, that, really puts the world at grief, to understand that this can happen anywhere in the world. We always, look at the United States, say, well, that's America for you. That's a Tuesday for you. But no, it can happen at any point, any time. And it really comes to us to really have these discussions about what leads into it. What leads to people becoming this violent and causing these horrific scenes that are affecting, the most vulnerable, innocent people, which is children. Children should not be in fear to go to school and play with their friends and learn, reading, writing, arithmetic. They should not be in fear. But it just seems like we're making it worse and worse for their generation, for my generation, for younger people and the country as a whole to really feel like a prosperous nation by many different standards. So this is where it gets a little more interesting here. So you saw in the Global News Report, they brought up this. This is the emergency alert that was brought out to people telling the town that they were under lockdown because of this active shooter. I said in the Reuters report that they purposely misled people about the description of the shooter. And just like this emergency alert here, says police initiate public alert, Tumbler Ridge and surrounding area active shooter. Alert issued by Tumbler Ridge RCMP. Those in Tumbler Ridge area are asked to stay inside and shelter in place. Lock your doors. Refrain from leaving your homes. Suspect described as female. So, Reuters, Global News, the RCMP is not fully describing the suspect, but they all say it's female. Well, that's not the case, though, because actually, the suspect is a transgender male to female, and they leave that out intentionally. Why would you leave that out in the description of the suspect? You said at first you can't release any information because they're a minor, but yet here you are, you have an alert saying that the suspect is female. So you can't even properly describe the actual person. You can't release that information that this suspect is a transgender male to female. Why is that? Why are you intentionally lying to people? Here's Trending Politics saying RCMP to reveal details of Tumbler Ridge shooting firearms, a long gun, a modified handgun in a few more days as probe examines how teen with mental health history accessed them despite expired license and prior police seizures. So the police know the suspect. Isn't that interesting? The police know the suspect. They know they've been to the suspect's house, multiple occurrences, seizing firearms that legally can't be obtained because of mental health issues. This is a transgender male to female teen suspect. And you're actively lying to not only the people at Tumbler Ridge, but the entire country about the identity of this person. Why? Why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense. So here's table salt. The RCMP did not release the Tumbler Ridge shooting's name for over 24 hours because they want to protect his privacy and notify next of kin of his death. But because he blasted his whole family too, that took some time. Peak Canadian lunacy. So this is the thing I don't understand. You make the case about how you can't release any information because the suspect is a minor, which I can understand a portion of that. Yes, if you're under a certain age, that they don't release information on a minor for privacy issues. I can kind of understand that. But at the same time, you said the suspect was female in reports. You have the news media run around saying it's a female. You have the alerts saying it's a female. But guess what? It's not a female. It's a biological man transitioning to become a woman with mental disorders and multiple occurrences with the police. So they know all this. They know all the information. Why did it take so long to release it? Why are they purposely undermining the Canadian public? That seems so weird. It seems so weird. Why would you do that? Why would you intentionally do that to sabotage the investigation of an active shooter in a small town in BC? Why would you do that? Here's some more to this. The more you look into this, it's really, really eerie. It's really eerie. And I think there needs to be more investigation on how this is being reported, not just investigating the incident itself. So, in this case, in Tumbler Ridge, the father of a 12-year-old shooting victim says the Royal Canadian Mounted Police gave the family no information for 9 hours. The family learned that their daughter's death from a student who performed CPR for 45 minutes. So no information to the parents. The parents were told the town was under lockdown. They brought the parents to a community center, locked away from the school, and they weren't told anything. They weren't told any information. So imagine if you were that parent and your child was at that school during an active shooting, and you're left 9 hours with no information about whether your child is safe or not. Imagine how crazy that is. That even in a small town, they would do this. It seems like something out of the Uvalde book. Remember Uvalde, Texas? They wouldn't allow the parents to go near the school. The police stood there for almost an hour before they walked in and actually engaged in an active shooting that was killing young children. Seems like a similar incident. So here's what this father had to say about it.
Beautiful soul. She's a light in our family. She loved art and anime. She wanted to go to school in Toronto. And we just loved her so much. She was thriving in high school. She never hurt a soul. She was a supporter, LGBTQ supporter, and she was the last person who ever deserved this.
She was in grade 7?
Grade 7, yeah. 12 years old. She was 3 months away from her 13th birthday.
Can you describe yesterday? I mean, she just went to school like any other day, right?
Yeah, I let her off. I let her go to school with her brother Ethan in the morning, and I had soaked in that moment watching them walk in the door together for whatever reason, and I didn't know it would be the last time they'd go to school together. But
when did you learn something had happened, or how did this come to you?
Ethan had called about 3:05 after he had text messaged saying, "I love you." And he called and said that he was in a utility room and that he was hiding and he didn't know where Kylie was.
Sorry, can I just say something? I just want to touch on this. Like, I see...
How old is he? Sorry.
He's 15.
Okay,
but
sorry,
when I open social media, I'm seeing lots of stuff about the shooter. I'm seeing the ideology stuff. And I don't think any of that matters when there's 9 other souls that were lost that day. Like 7 kids and 2 adults. And we need to put their pictures up on social media. It's like, there's a hero named Maddie Levesque who did CPR on my daughter for 45 minutes. And she was the one who came and told us 9 hours later that our daughter had passed because the police hadn't said anything to us.
The police never said a word for 9 hours. What? Again, if I was in that person's footsteps, I had a child and, off to school, I'm getting all these alerts about an active shooting at that school where my child's in danger. I'm supposed to just keep my chill for 9 hours until the police says a word to me? It just seems so insane. It just seems so insane. For 9 hours. It's a small town. They literally shut everything down. So literally, word gets out. They could easily figure out what's going on. The police could actually notify the parents in real time, but they chose not to for 9 hours. Why would they do that? Why? What would be the point? What's the intent of that? Do they have to go through certain hurdles to make sure that they're allowed to release the information to make sure your child is safe? Oh, I can't release the information of, you being a parent and all. I can't release the information of your child because my higher ups are forbidding me to. Like, what is the intent of this? Why? Why would you? What would you do for 9 hours when your child is in danger of a critical situation? What would you do? How would you respond? How would you react? I'd be infuriated. I'm surprised this guy's keeping his calm in this interview. For 9 hours? Really? That's insane. That is insane. Here's this guy, Dean Sorkiako. I don't know how to pronounce that properly. I apologize. He says, politicians praising the Tumbler Ridge RCMP today makes me want to vomit. The RCMP were well aware of how dangerous the trans teen was. The RCMP had previously removed guns from the trans teen's house. The RCMP then gave the guns back, even though they were in danger. Again, so much of this needs to be explained. They knew exactly who the suspect was. They lied about the identity to cover it up because saying that this is a biological man transitioning to a female, a transgender teen, you can't apparently say that. You just say it's a female, which is absolutely a lie, and you release that out to the general public. They're covering up the fact that the police, the RCMP themselves, specifically know what a dangerous person this teenager is. Has extreme cases of mental instability. How they had to take away firearms from this teenager. They know how dangerous this person is. And yet they had to, cover up all this information. They can't release this information. Why? Because it's going to expose you? Is that what this is? Going to expose the RCMP's failure to know how dangerous this person is? Here's Land Amal pointing this out. He said, remember how during the Nova Scotia mass shooting, the RCMP didn't put out an alert despite the shooter being on a rampage for 12 hours. Then they described the Tumbler Ridge shooter as a woman, and they wouldn't admit it was a man. Even now, they won't say it. Why? What purpose, what general purpose would you have to not release all this information? Why would what purpose would you have to misinform the general public? Like, the shooter's dead. The shooter's dead. I don't think we're worried about, hurting their feelings. I don't think that the LGBTQ community is going to be heartbroken when you release the information that this teenager was a maniac. And you know it. You know it. The RCMP knows it. The police know it. They've been to their house multiple times. So why would you cover this up? Why? What's the intent of it? Here's this. This is from the National Post. March 19, 2021. BC father arrested for repeatedly speaking out about his teen's transgender treatment to stay behind bars. What? So, the father speaking out about transgender treatment, all the hormone therapy, the chemical mutilations, the chemical castration that they do to young children. He went behind bars. Is that crazy? So, a father speaking out about medical castration of their child gets locked away in prison, but not someone with extreme mental issues who has had their guns seized by the RCMP multiple times, and it's now the suspect, the dead suspect of this horrific shooting. I don't even have the words to say this. I don't even have the words to describe how messed up that is. And it really comes down to having the discussion of how does a teenager get to this point? How do we keep getting through these? How does this keep happening? We need to have a full discussion about this. We need to discuss mental health. We need to bring up that these psychotic pharmaceuticals going down innocent throats of children that are messing up their brains, or messing up internally, and could result in stuff like this. You know, you look at antidepressants. They say right there in the side effects could lead to violent assaults. So these are all conversations we need to be having. And especially now, because Canada, this is a rare instance for us. This never really happens. And we're fortunate. We're lucky to have that. We look at the United States and say, thank God it's not happening here. But now it's happening here. So something's up. Something's up. And we need to have that conversation. It's also kind of interesting, the timing of this. Which, I know this is going to sound a bit more tinfoily hat than most people will like, but I want to throw this on here, given the fact that this shooting is happening at the same time that the Canadian Liberal government, the federal government, is reevaluating their failed gun buyback program. Remember this? Remember how they said they need to take hunting rifles, legally obtained hunting rifles used for sport, away from Canadians? And then Dominic LeBlanc even added that, hey, maybe we should take those guns and send it out to neo-Nazis in Ukraine. That was his great solution. We're going to take away hunting rifles from innocent Canadians, law-abiding citizens, take them away from them, and send them off to neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? Well, we know that the gun buyback program has been a massive failure. Massive failure. They spent extraordinary amount of money. They did not obtain the guns. They have failed at every point in turn. You know that premiers are sticking their neck out, saying no. Scott Moe made it perfectly clear in Saskatchewan he's not going to comply with this. Police scenes across the country have came together and saying they're not going to do this because it seems ridiculous. So it seems kind of suspicious, the timing. Now, I cannot, confirm nor deny that this plays into it, but I just wanted to point that out there, that it's kind of interesting that at the same time that they're trying to reevaluate the gun buyback program and figure out how is there a way we can get Canadians to think that giving up their ability to legally obtain a firearm for hunting is actually a bad idea. Oh, I know. Now we have a rare school shooting involving a mentally messed up trans teenager to scare people into complicity. Again, I can't confirm nor deny that, but you have to look at all these. You have to look at all this spectrum of this, and you have to point out the coincidences, because sometimes it reveals exactly why this happened. Why exactly these 10 children, or sorry, was it 9 children? I forget the exact amount, because there was the children, then there was also the parents, there was also another person on the way to the hospital. So I don't really know the exact number, but the victims involved in this, were they part of some, scheme involved in this? Or was it just an incident that could have easily been preventable, as we're seeing here? Could have easily been preventable had the RCMP followed through into, understanding that what they're dealing with is a mentally screwed up person. A mentally screwed up person that they know. And why they're keeping this information out of the general public, why parents had to wait 9 hours for a police officer to respond to make sure their kid's all right, that I don't understand. And that needs to come to the light of this, and that what needs to be the highlight of this conversation is why they're covering up something like this. Why they're doing the same mistakes we've seen in Uvalde, Texas, what we've seen in Parkland, Florida. It really seems like that. Hey, here's a suspect that could potentially be involved in doing a school shooting. People were warned about this. People were warning the RCMP. The RCMP went to the suspect's house and they just allowed this to happen. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered.